Welcome back to the Interpreting Wine podcast with me, your host and podcast founder, Lawrence Francis. Today's episode marks the halfway point of my Lost Episode series and features a tasting with Pandemonium Wines. In what is one of the most comprehensive portfolio tastings I've ever recorded for the podcast, Viliam and Prianka of Pandemonium Wines take us on a virtual tour of Slovakia, its history and terroir, and of course its wonderful wines. This is the first time that I'm covering Slovakian wine in such depth, and even though this was recorded back in April 2018, and many of these vintages are no longer available, there is so much information here, especially if you've never explored this fascinating winemaking country. Enjoy!
I was born in Slovakia, in a family which both parts from mother side and father side were working and then making wines. So the history was there. Of course, the collectivization and communism sort of like, did mess in our countries. But still, my father, until today, he's producing for household usage, basically, or consumption, the wines. So I was around since, early age, and I was drinking our house wine, of course, since 15. And then I started to travel around, and I moved when I was entering to Prague to study there, and started to more enjoy the conventional winemaking of Moravia, which is great. But I was not really exposed to any wines of West, really. And really, I remember my first trip to Italy when I was maybe like 20, 21, and I started to explore. We went to just random conventional grocery store and bought a few wines there and started to explore. And I realized those are great wine, but they are not that different, or not that, or Czech wines or Slovak wines are not inferior. They are great wines too. So that was the moment when I sort of realized that the wines produced in Central Europe can compete with the wines of West. Then a big step forward again in that thinking of working with wine was when I started to come often to London. That's maybe like 3 years ago. Basically our branch is here, so I was coming for business trips. And every time we went out, first at colleagues, later on with my current girlfriend, and with the friends. And every time when I went to the restaurant, I was presented with a book of wine, and there were 3 pages of French wine, 3 pages of Italian one, then a little bit of Spanish, a little bit of Portugal, then New World, of course, and then rest of the world. And there was maybe 1 Croatian, and maybe 1 Hungarian. And I was all the time thinking, like, why is this? Why there is no, wine from our countries? Which deep in me, I thought they are not inferior or very good. So that was sort of like behind my head thought, why is this happening? And really, I was interested in changing it. So I'm every time I'm saying that for me is really bringing the Slovak and Czech winemakers to London, sort of my own quest to sort of wave the flag of winemaking in here.
I was born and grew up in Australia, so the wines that were sort of on the table and at restaurants were very much, New World, different style, although I was exposed to obviously French, Italian, and some Spanish. There was one evening that I went out for dinner with 2 friends. We went to a lovely steak restaurant, and we ordered a piece of steak, and a waiter recommended a Clare Valley Shiraz, and it was just mind-blowing. It is burned in my memory, the wine itself, but also just the combination of the wine and the food and the experience. Like, that's one wine moment that I will always think about sort of throughout my life. I have to confess that, I've enjoyed wine, tasting wine, and sort of, enjoying it with friends. I've always sort of seen it as a experiential type thing. For a while, but it wasn't until I came to London and joined, got my current job, that I started to meet people who had a much sort of deeper interest in wine. And it's through that sort of exposure to that depth that I got really, really interested in learning more. And then after Viliam and I met, we were discussing specifically the gaps in London market and what we did see here, what we didn't see here, and what was really good and what we thought should be here. We visited some winemakers, and Pandemonium was born.
So as I mentioned, I grew up in the sort of household which, or my parents, they made wine. So I was familiar with the processes, how to make house wine. I'm not schooled. I don't have any certification. I understand wine from the point of drinking it and enjoying it. It's really about, for me, what I like and what I don't like. The entry point for me to natural wine was really Prianka's sort of problem with the sulfites, where when she drinks conventional winemaking, which is full of preservative, the hives sort of starts. So that was the point where we started to look more on natural winemaking and realize that those concepts or those processes in how the natural winemaking is basically made are very common. What we did. I'm not familiar with those big sort of like producers which knock off 100,000 barrels a year and they have all the processes and control things. But I know what, or I feel for the natural winemakers, how they do it. Today we'll be traveling around Slovakia a bit. We will move from west to east. Slovakia is sort of horizontally oriented in terms of the shape. So we will start in a western part, wine region of Little Carpathian. From there we will be tasting two winemakers. One is Pressburgerland Wienschloss Malatschek, who is already by the name, the listener can understand that is rooted very much in Austro-Hungarian Empire sort of winemaking, or he likes the history of it. The other winemaker is Živé Víno, which can be loosely translated to alive wine. I really like this winemaker or this house. So they are really true to the no waste policy, let's say, where they are really working with the barrels in a way they are not wasting. They are not wasting the wine. They are not wasting any produce which is created in a vineyard, not only grapes. So the first winemaker from the Little Carpathian region, as I mentioned, is Pressburgerland Wienschloss Malatschek. From this winemaker, we are currently importing two wines, both white / skin contact / orange. Although we are definitely looking into bringing his reds, which are amazing as well. Mr. Malatschek is using for the white wines or skin contact wines two varieties called Rothgipfler and Zierfhandler Roth. It rolls out sometimes pretty hard from the tongue. These are very common in Austrian winemaking. Usually they are used for blends, especially in conventional winemaking. So it's really hard to find them as a single varietal wines, and it's even more rare to have it in a natural wine making take on. So about the first or both of the wines are very fragrant. The Rothgipfler feels dry. The Zierfhandler Roth, it's still dry wine, but it feels a little bit off dry in terms of taste. But if you look at the residual sugar, it's dry wine.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I'm struggling actually to draw out a descriptor here on the nose, simply because it's so vegetal in a way. It's like in a really positive way. It's very herbaceous for me, and I've not sniffed that many herbs in my life, so I'm not the best at describing the herbs in it. And for me, that's even coming through more than the fruit on the nose, which I love. And I don't know if you've been to the winery, but it often suggests and gives a clue about how the winery actually looks, and it tends to be more greener, and there's more herbs and vegetation around to influence the wine when it comes through.
We are about to indulge in the second wine of Pressburgerland Wienschloss Malatschek, the Zierfhandler Roth, which has much more flowery notes than vegetable notes, definitely. Sort of a little bit of honey. That's actually interesting. Every time when I'm tasting with the people with the different countries, with a different sort of background, they feel different notes in it, because those are imprinted in your mind as you are growing up. You are eating different food. You are living in a different terroir of your really. So it's interesting, like, to listen to other people, what they really think and what they feel, what they find out or explore in the wine. So that's for me. I just sort of sniffing and giving my notes, but very welcome to hear what are your findings. This feels sort of off-dry, more off-dry than the previous one, definitely. But it still has very nice acidity, which is actually, I would say, signature for all of the wines produced in Slovakia, as it is basically one of the northest wine-making region in Europe. So we have much colder climate, and also in a combination of with soils, it provides this nice acidity, and also approach of some winemakers who are harvesting the grapes when they are not fully ripe or overripe, to keep the acidity in it. That's all this combination of three variables is basically creating beautiful wines, and with this signature sort of robust acidity in it.
I got to tell you, you can probably tell I got a big smile on my face. I totally love that wine, and the word that's like flashing out for me when I drink that is versatility, because as you said before, I'm not saying these are warm, but they are. You perhaps might have these slightly more chilled, but this is almost. Again, in a really positive way, it almost reminded me of like a really good dessert wine. Dessert wine that's not sticky and is not kind of, gummy in the mouth, but it's just got so much of those floral notes are coming through from the nose and in the mouth. But then I could imagine this being chilled and getting a different sensation from it. So this is just super, super versatile. All of the things you just said about balance and perfume and go along with that. And 2016, I'm guessing the percentage here. So yeah, like another 12.5%. Lovely, lovely wine. Yeah, this is cool.
If I could say one more thing about these wines, I think I would call them siblings. They share common characteristics, but they have, their own distinct personalities. I think they both express the terroir really well. And you can tell there's been a lot of love put into both of them. Cool, so we're still in the same wine region, but a different winemaker this time. So we're moving on to Živé Víno, which, as Viliam mentioned, means a live wine. What I love about this winemaker is that it's the same family of wines each year, all are skin contact, and they make 4 wines every vintage, and they're no waste. They have a no waste policy. So basically they will make each grape to its sort of, fullest potential. And then once it's time to blend and bottle, they will pick and choose the best of each vintage, and they won't throw away the rest. They will make liqueur or brandy. Nothing goes to waste. So we're going to start with the Blanc wine. The Blanc is, for the 2015 vintage, it's 85% Müller-Thurgau, excuse my poor pronunciation, and the remaining 15% is Rhine-Riesling. In 2015, they had a great year with Rhine Riesling, but that's one that they say can be temperamental. so it's not always included in the vintage, but we got lucky. So this one, the Müller was on skin contact for about 8 days, the Rhine a little bit longer, so about 14, and then they were blended in steel tanks for a couple of months before bottling, and they were matured in acacia barrels, in old acacia barrels, so to preserve the flavors of the grapes.
So as you sniff it, or when you start enjoy the wine, it opens very nicely. The fragrance is coming mostly from Müller-Thurgau, of course, because there is 85% of it. But what I really like about this wine is also the fact that Müller-Thurgau is in a wine from 2015. Usually in Slovakia and Czech Republic, the Müller-Thurgau is used for two sort of different usage than just wine or aged wine. First of all, a lot of winemakers are actually selling Müller-Thurgau Burčák. Burčák is basically fermenting juice. So when you have the highest point of fermentation, sort of 2, 3, 4 days in the fermentation, we are drinking it. We are loving it. There is a saying that you should every year drink as much Burčák, as much blood you have in your veins to sort of change blood. So a lot of Müller-Thurgau juice is actually sold as a Burčák. And the other sort of way how it gets to the market very early is the young wine production. So a lot of young wine, sort of Beaujolais Nouveau style wines are or gets to the market, and they are made from Müller-Thurgau. So getting a Müller-Thurgau in vintage 2015 in the year 2018, it's not very common.
So we're going to move on to our second in the Živé Víno family, and this one's called Oranž, or Orange. This one is a blend of 3 grapes. So it's 75% Welshriesling, which is, strangely enough, not related to Rhine Riesling. That is something that I learned last year. Then there's 20% of Gruner, Veltliner, and for the remaining 5% is Gewürztraminer. And for me personally, it's the 5% Gewürz that sort of hits when I smell this wine, which is quite interesting because it's still only 5% of the composition.
So I maybe just add that the 14 days of skin contact or fermentation, it's not all in that wine, as the winemaker after the maceration transfer the juice and wine, basically young wine, into acacia barrel. But also with that wine, 20 kilos of those skins are added to the barrel for the whole time of aging for 10 months. So this creates a beautiful fruitiness in that wine, which a lot of people really, really enjoy.
So the next wine we're going to is Ryšák, or ginger in Slovak. It is a field blend of 6 grapes, 3 white and 3 red. Beautiful wine. All the grapes are harvested, put together, spontaneous fermentation, and they're put into oak barrels for about 12 months before bottling.
Cool, perfect.
The result of the winemaking here is a beautiful wine which wedge in between rosé and red. Again, the robust acidity which beautifully lingers on the tongue is present. And the wine is amazing for food pairing, especially with some spicy food, because it beautifully cleanses the palate. But usually when we open just 2 of us a bottle, it's a bottle for 1 hour and a half and it's done, because it's highly, highly, highly drinkable. So we are going to the last bottle of Živé Víno, or the variety of Živé Víno wines. The name is Karmazín, which is a color of red in Slovak language. This is a blend again of Blaufränkisch 60% and 40% of Zweigelt. Again, beautiful maceration on skin and then goes to the barrel. I don't like to talk about this wine, I like to drink it, so let's go.
I purposely have stayed quiet through those because I think it it helps probably for me to come in at the end and talk about the themes, especially as we've been having 4 wines there. I love all of those. I just think they're all really nicely balanced. I take your point around the acidity. I think later on there with it's not a rosé, but with the white and red blend, and now with the red, there's more food type characteristics, more gastronomic characteristics coming out here. A little bit more salinity, a little bit more complexity. I love it, and I just question really. I think I just want to know about the age of these vines, and how long these guys have been making wine.
Behind the brand of Živé Víno, there are really 2 guys who had a other wine project before, which was more to conventional winemaking, and this is their real natural winemaking, end to end, starting in the vineyard, ending in the cellar. They moved basically to their current cellar in 2007, and they were really shaping the wine 2007, 9, and really like the production or they established themselves in around 2009. Currently they are producing around 7,000-8,000 bottles a year. As was previously said, there is a variety in terms of vintage to vintage, as was mentioned with the Ryšák in the Blanc, or in the Ryšák, because there are 3 whites, 3 reds, so not every time everything is amazing. And they, as mentioned, they are sort of having the no wasting policy. So even though let's say some barrel doesn't perform anymore, lately they started to use some barrels which were not great for the wine, for the lambic beers. Or as mentioned, Ryšák is not performing well, so it turned into spirit, and they have absolutely marvelous liquor made from sour cherry and mulberry. We are going to try as well. The wines are around 30-40 years old, so they're well developed in terms of root system. Now we are moving a bit southeast from Little Carpathian wine region to Terroir Strekov, where amazing wines are being produced and amazing grapes are being grown. The listeners might be familiar with other houses there. We are importing currently 3 winemakers from this region. One is Kasnyik Winery, the other is Mr. Tibor Malatschek, and Matyáš Pince. All of these wines are natural fermentation, bioregime in the vineyards, and just amazing wines. We dived in the production of Kasnyik Winery. We have currently the Grüner Veltliner or Veltlínske Zelené Sur Lie. That means the wine was kept on a fine lees throughout the whole fermentation and aging of the wine. It's nicely barreled. It has a beautiful notes of that Veltliner, so a little bit of spiciness on the nose, a little bit of spiciness in your mouth. I like this wine because if you put it next to the any conventional winemaking wine, it's very hard to tell difference. Some of the natural winemakers, they really like the funkiness in the wine. Some are sort of schooling the wine into tones of the conventional winemaking and preserving the whole sort of terroir and natural winemaking in them. So this wine is really appealing to people who are not into that funkiness if natural winemaking, but still they want to have natural wine in their glass. We are diving into Welshriesling of Kasnyik Winery called Nabobuliach. This is wine made from, as mentioned, Welshriesling grapes. And interesting in this wine is that the 30 kilos of hand-selected picked berries, full berries, not crushed berries, were added to the barrel as well with the wine and kept there for the whole time of fermentation and aging of the wine. And this provided a beautiful outcome in the wine and preserve the fruitiness, and when you will drink it, you will have a beautiful long linger of when you basically bite into the fresh grape of Welshriesling in your mouth, that will be the last taste which will linger on in your mouth.
We're moving on to the Maria Cuveé of Kasnyik, and it's made using your familiar Bordeaux variety, so a third of Cabernet Sauvignon, a third Merlot, and a third Cabernet Franc. I think personally, if I was to have this in a blind tasting, it would be difficult for me to discern that this was not an old world wine. I think it gives a lot of the familiar earthy dark fruit notes of these grapes that you would expect. It's almost a trick that it's not an old world wine, but it is very quaffable and one of those sort of what I would call a warm blanket wine.
I would like to point out one more beautiful bottle from Kasnyik Winery called Ali Bernet. It's a single variety, no sulfur added Ali Bernet red wine. Ali Bernet is used in Slovakia and it was bred in Crimea in 50s. And the wine or the grape was used as a coloring wine mostly for the blends. Or like small additive to red wines, single varietal red wines. The winery is producing single variety Ali Bernet, no sulfur added, under the glass vinolog, and this wine is just amazing. It's ink dark, very 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 dark color. It has beautiful notes of red and blackberries on the nose, and in the taste it's full bodied, beautiful tannins. A lot of gemmed berries, cranberry, mulberry, sour cherries. This is amazing, right? Amazing for pairing as well. I'm very very happy that I have this wine and I can enjoy it at home sometimes.
I'll keep this fairly brief, but I love that warm blanket wine. A description of the Maria Cuveé. I call this a smiley wine because as you can tell, I try this and I love it. It's just all of the things that you've just said, so there's not really too much need to talk about it, but it's just like a pleasure to drink. I don't think there's enough really said about that. Where we can at times overanalyze wines, and it just slips down lovely. And if we were just sort of sitting here as friends around the table, this wouldn't last long. But really, interesting shift. I think overall those wines, they're reminding me and they're making me think much more of gastronomy, I would say, than the first batch. But really nice to take this journey around Slovakia and see what else is out there.
We are staying in the village of Strekov, really, or Strekov wine region. We are on a visit with Tibor Melecki. We are going to try two of his reds. One is Dunaj, which is very special grape. This is amazing grape which is can create naturally wines without adding any extra alcohol, easily 16-17%, which is sort of like port style wines. And then we will try his Cuveé or blend, which is from also Dunaj, Pinot Noir, and Blaufränkisch. Talking about Tibor can take an hour, but I will very simplify it. Tibor is really true to handcraft of the wine. Working in the vineyards mean no automation at all. Those are all single post or single pole vineyards. He is very particular about the yield sort of reduction, so he extracts the best from the grapes or from the vineyard and from the soil. When it comes to cellar, again, very very handcrafted approach. The wine never experienced any physical sort of pressure or anything. He doesn't believe in pumping wine. He doesn't believe in any mechanization. Everything is just gravity and natural processes. His approach to the using of sulfur translates to that as well. He believes in either no sulfur or very, 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 very limited sulfur. When he talks about the sulfites, he is basically saying that it's like when you are cooking the soup, you need to add a little bit of spices or something to make it like good, and that translates to levels of 30 milligrams in liter. His white wines are produced in ceramic vats. He made sort of shaped for him 330 liters ceramic not qvevri but vats, and he puts everything in it. So basically he crushes the grapes, and the grapes with the juices are going to the vats, and they are staying there for 3-4 months. So it's a very long skin fermentation on skin, and you can imagine that after those 3 months in that vat, you have basically 3 layers. The very bottom layer is yeast and sort of seeds and everything. Then you have the clear wine, and then you have the skins. So from 330 liters of wine, he's producing around 100 liters of for 330 liters of grapes and wine, he's producing around 100 liters of clear wine.
So I just wanted to add a little bit about our visit with Tibor. I think from the moment we walked in to his, when you walk in, you're first sort of greeted with a really warm dining table. But what really stands out to you is these giant custom-made ceramic. I would even call them jars. They look like They look like jars. And it was sort of very clear from the minute that we walked in that he was a meticulous person, that he put thought and care into arranging every aspect of his environment. And our sort of first thoughts were only confirmed by, when we sat down for a meal with him, the bread was made by hand from a local baker. The goulash was fresh and made by a local friend from, I think, locally reared cows. And as you walked in his cellar and he sort of explained the arrangement of the barrels and everything to you, you could tell that he had planned this out in great detail too. And I think it's very difficult to translate, to describe verbally, but I think that's what really translates into his wines.
We are very excited, I would thrilled that actually have his wines in London because Tibor is well-known persona of Slovak winemaking, and actually majority of his production is directly purchased by local wine lovers. We are talking about very wealthy people who comes to a vineyard and buy 1,000 bottles on the spot. And he actually saying that he believes that a lot of his wines, what he has in his archives, is very young comparing to wines which are sitting in the archives of these people. So actually having hands on even small batch as we have is absolutely mind-blowing for me that actually we can have him in London.
One more thing to add, that just goes to reiterate about his sort of meticulousness and attention to detail is the labels. And I wish I could show you, as I'm saying this, what they look like. But he has the most, one of the most sort of simple and elegant labels that I've seen on bottles. It is again sort of a no waste kind of approach. He has a distinct set of grapes that he uses each year. They're all listed out, and every year he takes a silver pen, and for each different wine he crosses out all of the grapes that he doesn't use. Hopefully you all get to try, or at least see one of his bottles, and you'll know what I mean. But this is just one thing. Another thing that was quite fascinating and mind-blowing when we met him.
Talking about phylloxera, interesting fact about the winemaking in Slovakia, is that we were using a different root stocks. I believe that's the correct term. Western part of Europe have been supported or survived phylloxera sort of plague using the American roots and plugging in the Chardonnay and all of these grapes. We were using the southern grapes or southern roots, which we basically brought in Hungary, Slovakia, and plugged in these old grapes. And when sort of things evolved, these of course these roots were also bearing fruit, which we called self-bearing grape or Croatian or Bulgar or all these names. I mean, you talk to old, I would say, grandfathers, they will give you all a different name. So after sort of phylloxera was wiped out, something called like a great book of wine grapes were created, and the real varieties were signed in, like Chardonnay, Ryšák, Welshriesling, all of these. And these Horvat or Croatian or self-bearing brood was not recognized as a grape. So therefore, you cannot create a wine from this grape and call it Croatian and sell it on the market. But of course, in some vineyards, these grapes are still sort of living. And these grapes are very, very, very interesting in terms of the way how or of their signatory taste and signatory smell, and also the way how the wine is sort of growing. So we have actually one wine in our portfolio, let's say, which we are going to taste, which is made from this grape. This is not really for sale, it's just for fun, created by guys from Marlatindo, called Riparia. It's really funny wine, just for tasting.
I mean, I love the stories of his uniqueness, his meticulousness, and totally that comes out in the wine. You know, I'm struggling actually to think in my mental Rolodex for a wine that I've ever had that is close to this Dunai, and I'm struggling. I'm coming up short. You know, there's nothing really there. The second here, the blend of Dunai, the Pinot Noir, and what is Blaufränkisch, is more familiar to me. But even still, you know, there's just something that he's doing and something that he's capturing here that is Moorish, but it's just, again, is totally unique and not like a Blaufränkisch from Austria or one from Hungary. It's just really putting his unique stamp on this. This is delicious stuff.
We are moving forward to the central Slovakia, to Terroir Strekov. Terroir Strekov is located in volcanic soils. The volcanic soils are coming from eruption of Stratovolcanus Sitno, which erupted 3 million years ago. So you can imagine that the soils are minerally, and actually we are talking about the tuffs, which are the sediments of the ashes, volcano ashes. The vineyards in there, you can imagine that they are not totally, let's say, unified in terms that you have one big vineyard, but there are small patches in the different sort of steep hills. So no mechanization can be really used. So working in a vineyard is really hard. The land itself has only 30 to 40 centimeters of soil, and under that you have a solid bedrock of the volcanic ashes, as I mentioned. So the wines produced in this terroir have a high minerality and are truly volcanic wines. We will be talking about 3 winemakers, 3 friends who are sort of working together, but all of them making their own wines, but sharing the whole feeling for natural winemaking. The first one is Pivnica Čajkov. The next one would be Marvla Tindo, and the third one would be Pivnica Brhlovce. All of the guys are growing one sort of signatory grape, which is called Pesecká Leánka or Fetea Scaragala. This is a grape which wandered over the centuries, really, from Romania throughout the Hungary all the way to Slovakia and sort of nested there. So this is a grape which all of three winemakers are sharing. All three have different approach to it, how to work with the wine or with the grape and shaping in different way. All three, of course, amazing. And then another sort of plot in their cooperation are Pinots, as the Pinica Čajkov is using Pinot Gris as their Pinot. Marlatindo is using Pinot Noir, and Pinica Brloce is using Pinot Blanc. So they are sharing these two sort of plots in their winemaking and having fun with it. We are diving into Pesetská Leánka of Pinica Čajkov. Pinica Čajkov is producing two different take-ons on Pesetská Leánka. One is stainless steel production to sort of preserve all the fruitiness, all the beautiful notes in it. The other one is called Rustical, which is Pesetská Leánka in the barrel, which provides a nice sort of darker tones in the color of wine, and also rounding the whole performance on your tongue. Still, the notes on nose, it's sometimes hard to say, are very, very fruity and very floral, and same applies to the taste. I really like about Pesetská Leánka all of the three producers I was talking about, namely Pinica Čajkov, Marlatindo, and Pinica Brloce, that they are keeping their Pesetská Leánkas in form of more acidic wine. And it's really coming from the history of the winemaking in Slovakia, where Pesetská Leánka was sort of a working wine in terms that people really drank it in the fields, and it was very common to cut it with water. So you took 1-2 bottles with you to the vineyard as you were working, you cut it with the water and drink it during the day. And you don't want really drink, too much fragrant, too much sweet wine. Therefore, they are keeping it beautiful, robust.
I love actually the here's a good word, juxtaposition of this wine with the last one, because whereas the last one did have that, all of the story of we're really kind of reducing down and we're drawing this out. This is then so much lighter and acidic wines, it's like you had me at acidic, it's like I love acidic wines. This is then just like really cleansing out my palate and just with deliciousness. I love it.
I would like to mention one feature of Pesetská Leánka grapes. They are very thin skin and they don't like to be pressed. When you press them, they basically are behaving as the aluminium foil, so they break. So a lot of you can find Pesetská Leánka from conventional winemaking in Slovakia, which is bitter. The reason behind is that the winemaker wants to get as much juice from the grapes as much, and therefore they pressing it. And as mentioned, after that, a lot of these tannins, a lot of these bitterness is released to the juice and creates not pleasant, to me at least, tones in the taste. There is a Děvín wine in our glasses. Who, for those who are not familiar with the Děvín grape, it's a crossbreed of I believe Mireturgau and Gewürztraminer. It produces beautifully fragrant wines, usually more to off-dry or all the way to off-sweet wines, but we are trying the Pinica Čajkov Děvín dry, beautifully fully perfumed wine with all the floral sort of meadow. When you are standing in the middle of meadow, there are a lot of bees around you, and you have these perfumes in your nose and also in your mouth. This is amazing wine in terms of I'm not really this is a nice wines to drink alone. I'm not sure about the wine pairing the food, maybe with some cheeses, more like a hard cheeses. Definitely, I cannot imagine this with some have it like a blue wine cheese or something like that. It would be fighting each other, but it's wonderful wine.
Yeah, I've got to come in here because this is again another really unique wine, and a couple of things here. I love this is all the volcanic soils that you've spoken about before, and the sweetness and the complexity and the volcanicity. I want to say, the minerality. It just works. It just works so well together. It really does. And another thing I'm just reminded of, it's something I've used to describe another wine that I can't remember, but this wine is bear with me here. This wine is, for me, is like, again, if perfume was edible, if you have a perfume and it actually tasted nice and you could drink it, that's this wine. It's lovely. It is so nice. But again, disclaimer, don't drink perfume. It doesn't taste nice as this wine.
Diving into a first Pinot represented in the three winemakers of Sitno guys, getting into Pinot Gris of Piwnica Čajkov. We have 3 bottles in here actually, because this beautiful grape is used in 3 different sort of like take-ons. First of all, we have Petnat from Piwnica Čajkov called Volcanica. It's beautiful orangey, lava-like color. This is actually a marriage of Pesecká Leánka and the Pinot Gris. Bubbly, yeasty, everything what you expect of the Petnat. The other one is very interesting wine. It's sort of a test of the winemaker to understand absolutely to the bits and pieces what the Pinot Gris is producing. It's called Extracta. This Pinot Gris Extracta is actually a wine which is made on must. So the wine is kept for 3-4 months on must on the skins, and actually the juice is reduced, so it's fully submerged, or the grapes are fully submerged in the whole contain of the juices, and outcome is very robust, almost red-like wine, which provides all the understanding, all the notes of Pinot Gris. Again, deep lava magma-like color. And then we are enjoying the Pinot Gris Volcanic, which is Čajkov's, I would say, proper orange wine, which is macerated on skins. After that goes to barrels, old oak barrels, and kept there for 8-10 months. And the outcome is if you know Pinot Grigio or Pinot Gris, the notes, the taste, all of that there, it's sort of like a signature wine of that grape. Moving on, Blaufränkisch or Frankovka Modrá. I would say one of the most prevalent wine or grapes in Slovakia. We are drinking the wine which was macerated for almost 3 weeks on the grapes, and then oaked for a year. It has full, nice, I want to say texture on the nose, but sort of tones of. It's hard to describe. Definitely pepperiness. Sort of candied fruit, as Prianka said. Beautiful profile. Medium bodied. Nice texture. A little bit of soils. Definitely the soil. The little bit of creepy, but definitely the minerality is sort of like punching through the tannins. Very nice wine. I would call it a light gastronomic wine. For wine pairing or by glass.
As everyone knows, I love Austrian wine. It's just lovely to have now, a Blaufränkisch or, the Slovakian equivalent. And this one is not really and not really representative of the Austrian variety. The Austrian variety for me is way more peppery, is way more spicy. And I'm getting way less of those notes here. And it's curious. I almost, as much Blaufränkisch as I've drunk this year, I would almost have struggled, I think, to identify this as a Blaufränkisch. It's got a lot more of the, I guess, more sort of subtle notes than I would have expected. But yeah, lovely, very drinkable. And as you say, yeah, definitely gastronomic and drinkable. That versatility, that word again.
Visiting Mar Rottindo in the same terroir of Strekov of Sitno Vulcano, we are pouring there, I would say, funky wine, really not for sale, called Riparia. I was talking about the grapes or grapes which are not recognized as grapes anymore. Horvat, Samorodák, all of Bulhar, all of these weird names, let's say. The one thing about this grape, and I'm sorry to swear, but it's a bitch to harvest. My mother was constantly talking about these stories because they were having it in the vineyard. And this grape, basically, when it's fully ripe and you touch the bunch, it's immediately fall off the bunch, and you need to basically pick each and every grape. So it was very hard to pick. And one note which you have in smell of the grape when it's in the bunch on the vineyard, also in the smell of the wine, and also in the taste in the wine, is the strawberry, but the forest strawberry, the very small forest strawberries. It's very vivid in it, and it's sometimes sort of like a dessert wine because you can create a dry wine from it, but because of this overpowering strong smell and taste of it, it's sometimes a little bit harder to consume in a bigger amount.
Yeah, this is a real highlight for me. Again, this Riparia. And yeah, all the things you just said there about the forest strawberry and I think for me this wine is one of the closest I've ever had to just like capturing that, like, bunch of wild fresh fruit. I really feel like I'm putting my nose into like a bowl of freshly picked fruit here, which I was actually lucky enough to have when I was over in Australia, and that freshness of when you get a piece of fruit and it's there and it's right in front of you, it's captured in this wine. This is lovely.
Petnat of Mar Rottindo, called Sedimental, very interesting. I would call it medium yeasty Petnat. It's made from Ryšák collected in one vintage. Made a stainless steel sort of approach wine from it. It sits on a fine lees for a year and waiting for next vintage. And when the next vintage juice or grapes are collected and the juice in high fermentation point, the juice is added to the existing wine, bottled and let for the secondary fermentation. It's well made Petnat. I would call it sort of opening salva for the evening. This is definitely something you can taste or you can serve when you have a sort of like a wine dinner, to sort of like you would do with a bottle of champagne or something like that, to for your visitors to sort of open the evening. It's really, really drinkable. It's bottled with yeast, of course, because it's the Petnat. It has beautiful profile on nose, beautiful profile on taste.
I love Petnats in general, but often I get a note on the nose that doesn't agree with me. I got to say, if you guys know Alka-Seltzer, this kind of taste, I don't know what that is, but Alka-Seltzer, and even through the nose and through the palate as well, not fruity. This very much at the kind of fizzy end of the spectrum, and not often like wine, in my experience. This is at the other end. This is at the kind of the fruitier end. This is like you said. I love what you said earlier about this is wine, good wine made into a pet nat, which for me is just sitting way better, and I think is almost more versatile, because even then, without the bubbles, you've still got a great wine. You don't have to smash this all in one evening. You know, if you've got half a bottle left the next day, you've still got a great wine to enjoy and savor.
Diving into a bottle of Veltlínske Zelené. It's a wordplay on the Veltlínske Zelené. Gruner Veltliner harvested in the smaller patches of the vineyard and then combined together. It's, to me, I was tasting the last, I guess, autumn in Prague, the youngsters of Milan Nestarec. And this wine is very much, when I'm tasting it, it's reminding me those youngsters. Again, this is wine which is better to drink than talk about.
For me, that is all about the herbs. It is bringing out fresh herbs on the nose and in the palate in a way that I would just love to see, you know, somebody who is a chef or somebody who is very gastronomic bring that together with a specific dish for that wine. It's really great.
We are drinking Marvatindo Essentia, which is Essentia of Pinot Noir, so it's a rosé wine. It has skill contact around those 24 hours, and after that it goes to the stainless steel. This wine, actually, I tried it first time when it was delivered to us. It was sort of like a blind purchase from the winemaker. But to me, when I tasted first time, it was very personal sort of experience, because sometimes you have these tastes or smells you remember from the first grade of elementary school or something like that. When I smelled and tasted this wine first time, I somehow found myself in the backyard of my grandmother or grandfather house, where I can remember there were chickens around. There were some grain heap. There was this pear tree with a sort of like a fallen fruit on the ground and sort of stamped over. And all of these smells combined together created some kind of, I don't know, some kind of mental imprint, which all of a sudden was, brought up by this wine. Once again, this is very subjective, some personal experience, but I really enjoy this wine because of this.
If I was going to sum this up, in short, I would just say strawberries and cream.
Perfect. Which I second. For me, it smells like strawberries and cream, tastes like strawberries and cream. Super consistent, but again, it keeps that kind of fresh note, that what we spoke about earlier with the kind of wild strawberry. This is very much, for me, like a bowl of strawberries and cream, like the real fruit and the real cream right there in front of you.
So we established we have a thirst quenching Pesecká leánka in our glasses. It's coming from the Brhlovce, Pivnica Brhlovce winemaker. Amazing wine, which is very robust in acidity. We sort of introduced this wine as a working wine, as this wine, from history point of view, was really taken to the vineyards. The grandfathers, fathers were taking it to the vineyards with them and drinking it throughout the days, cutting it with water, because the acidity and the fragrances allowed for that. It still keeps very interesting, very drinkable. It's beautifully sort of rounded in terms that it cleanses the palate in your mouth. Actually, the Pesecká leánka of Brhlovce was made half. Half of the wine was made in stainless steel to preserve all the beautiful fruitiness and sort of the notes of the grapes, and half of it went to the barrels to sort of round it the acidity. so it's not so pointy. And after that, it was blended together or sort of married together and bottled. It's very sort of simple wine, I want to say, in terms of understanding it. It's very straightforward, but very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, I've been encouraged to mix this with a little bit of Simply M&S, sparkling Scottish mountain water. And yeah, it just, again, I'm just thinking summer. I'm just thinking sitting outside with friends and having it maybe a little bit more chilled than it is now, but, you know, super refreshing and super accessible. And I just think that, you know, we can't be too precious about how we have our wines. You know, we have to bring people in, and I think we have to create, sounds dodgy, we have to create like gateway drugs for people, you know, into the wine world. And if somebody is like only having beer or only having Prosecco, then some of this with a bit of sparkling Scottish mountain water, that will get them into your, you know, into your world of Slovakian wine. Love it.
Pivnica Brhlovce, Veltlínka. Usually this wine would be called Veltlínske Zelené, Gruner Veltliner. What we have is Veltlínka, different name for different sort of wine, not to set up the expectation what is usually expected from the wine of Pivnice Brhlovce, Veltlínske Zelené. This vintage is special because of one thing. 2016 spring came with frosts. Spring frosts, and that sort of like damaged the grapes, damaged the vineyard, and the vineyard during the summer developed naturally botrytis, and after or during the autumn harvest, the grapes had to be hand picked, hand selected. Strangely enough, after the pressing or creating the juice, the fermentation was super long. The fermentation basically lasted from October all the way to February, March of the next year. Very slow fermentation, and then it naturally stopped. The outcome of the fermentation is off-sweet white wine, fully fragranced, fully developed wine. It's sort of a force majeure of the winemaking, where you are working with what you have.
I think what I'd just add here is that even though I do have a preference for more acidic wines, I think that when you have a balanced wine is a good wine. To me, that's a sweeter wine. That's maybe sweeter than I would naturally go for, but it's got levels, it's got layers, it's got balance. So it's super drinkable, you know?
Quick introduction to the last bottle we have from Pivnice Brhlovce, from the guys from under the volcano. It's called Corabella, as the winemaker is actually calling his wife, Corabella. We are looking at the blend of Alibernet and the Blaufränkisch. This is still sort of riding the wave of minerality and acidity, plus the more sort of level of tannins. It's much more grippier, it stays longer in your mouth. To me, this is a well sort of gastro wine for pairing with the heavier meats, steaks, anything like that.
Fantastic. Yeah, that region I knew from Mar Latindo, which I guess is the most famous international of the three. But I love the way the minerality is coming in. I'm a kind of an acidity freak, but I'm also a minerality freak as well. And that is the unsurprisingly, that is the underlying element coming through in all of those wines, yeah.
We are traveling way, way, way east to Slovakia, to the borders of Hungary, so sort of like very east end part and south part of that east end part. We are located in the Slovak Tokaj. Not many people or listeners might know that Tokaj as a Hungarian region has a corner which is spanning all the way to Slovakia. It's very tiny, I would say. And we have I would say a gem or a pearl of East Slovakia importing to United Kingdom. His name is Matúš Doviak. Recently he started to actually export his wine. He is a winemaker who has a lot of audience, and he was able to basically source or sell all of his production directly to the customers. But we were able to sort of attract him to bring his bottles to London. He has amazing pet nuts. One of its of the pet nuts, it's called Rampage, and especially 2016 vintage is amazing. As Matúš called it, it is a breakfast pet nut. It's very low in alcohol, and the yeasts are almost not there. It's a killer pet nut for it's very drinkable. We are going to try two of his wines. One is his Ordinarium Tokaj Dry, and the other one is Furmint 2016. Let's dive in. Tokaj region generally is well known for sweet ice wines produced mostly in Hungary. Azú, as they call it, 3, 5, 6, 9, 8 Putnoš. It's very interesting to have dry wines from this region as well. And Matúš is definitely the representative of this dry wine making. Of course, he's producing also ice wines, and also he's a spearheading sort of a persona in Slovak Tokaj who brought as a first person the Georgian Cuveé to the region, and having fun with that and creating wines as well. Currently we have Furmint 2016 single varietal in the glasses, and having fun with that. What struck me immensely was again coming from the understanding of Tokaj as a sweet wine producing region, and tasting the dry variation of these grapes or wines, you actually experience a different, I would say, a palate or tastes, and you find out that the wines are pretty saline. They have definitely a very distinguished taste and salinity in it, as you dry them out and create these beautiful wines. So once again, Furmint 2016, beautifully perfumed, with bits and pieces of salinity in on your tongue.
Like super mineralic, like crazy mineralic, and I don't know, I'm not much of a sort of a cave and kind of go under the earth type person. But I can imagine, get down there kind of almost like closer to the earth's core, and you're going to come across some smells like are coming out of this wine. But the taste is delicious. Yeah, that salinity, that, calling for food, gastronomic wine. Yeah, ticks all the boxes.
Has been named or pointed out, we have sort of like onion wine in our glasses, again from Matúš Doviak. Onion in terms that it has many layers. It has many layers in the on nose and in the taste as well. The wine is called Tokaj Dry Ordinarium 2015. It's a off-dry wine. As mentioned, there's a lot of layers on nose. Again, you can smell sort of the salinity really, and also like combined with the floral notes. Same applies to the taste profile. It's beautiful wine, very different to I would say what the listeners can know as a Tokaj wine, the ice wine or the sweet wine.
This is one of those wines that's taking me towards a spirit. I've done so many episodes. I can't remember the last wine that I mentioned that was reminding me of a spirit, but this is actually doing that for me in the same way that you have those different levels of complexity in a spirit. It's coming through in this wine beautifully. I'm guessing, of course, it's going to be 13%. It's not anything like as strong, but when you have that long age that comes from years and years and years in a barrel, I'm getting something similar here, similar level of complexity but here with a level of drinkability that you don't get in a spirit. So yeah, fantastic way to end things and to round off the tasting. Thank you so much to Viliam and Prianka. It was really fascinating listening back to the tasting. And I think you both did a fantastic job of sharing the stories of the winemakers behind the wines. Please do see below for the main social media contact details of Pandemonium Wines, as well as a contact email address. And of course, I would love to have you following along with me on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, at Wine Podcast on Twitter, and email hello@interpretingwine.com. In the next installment of the Lost Episode series, we journey to Spain with winemakers in Vinate in an interview I recorded back at the Indigo tasting of February 2018. See you next time.